So for repeating patterns, I want to do like a version of the precise way that I talked about last class where we use math a little bit, but we're going to actually allow ourselves a little bit more flexibility in this time. So I'm just dragging out a rectangle, but actually for this precise way, it would be a lot easier if we had an exact number, like if our rectangle was exactly 10 by 4 or whatnot. So if we click just once and not click and drag, just one click, this this box comes up and we can type in 10 by 4 or whatever. And right now, if we put this into repeat, it would be like a big grid, right? These black lines would show up. So I am going to give it a fill first off, and then I'm going to get rid of the stroke around it. We don't want any black stroke. So with it selected, I have to make sure the stroke box is in the front, and I can choose none. Okay, so stroke is the one with the center in it, and it has to be on the front of this little pile. Okay. So now it's just a rectangle. And with the pen tool, we could draw some motifs. So I'm not going to go deep into reviewing the pen tool, but you click and drag to create anchor points, right? And the handles that you drag out aren't your line. This curved line is your line. And when you click and drag again, you want to drag in the direction your line will be going. And your back end that you drag out, the other side that you're dragging like away from the anchor point on the other side, is still affecting the line. You can make closed shapes by coming back to the beginning. We can make corners, right? Right now these two handles are locked together, and we can make corners by holding Alt. And then we can rotate this lower handle, right? So no Alt. It's affecting the back line. And these two are locked in a straight line, which means it'll be a smooth line. And we can hold Alt and make it into a corner. And now my next line is going to go off in a corner shape. Make a big butt shape. You can also just click to make corners. Okay, and then someone was asking me in the earlier class, why don't we use the pencil tool? And the pencil tool is fine, but it allows you to be a lot less precise, honestly. So I can draw with it, but it's actually fairly laborious to hold the mouse button down the whole time. It can get kind of hard to do that. But when I come back to the center, again, that little circle appears near my cursor, or when I come back to the start of it. And that means it'll make a closed shape. And it actually smooths out my line a lot. So even if I like waver while I'm drawing it a little bit, right? It smooths out all of that line. So you can adjust that level of smoothness by double clicking on the pencil tool. And you can lower it down to accurate or raise it to super smooth. So that's down to accurate, and it left a lot of that in, where if I raised it to smooth, it smooths a lot of that out. Oh, there they are. Okay, they are all there still. I'm just drawing with no stroke and no fill right now, so they were just blank shapes. So now that I have all of these weird motifs, I could give them a few different fill colors. And start arranging them on the board. Warm colors. So I can arrange them over here. And so far, what we've done is arrange them and then cut them up immediately. but I'm going to try a little bit. These are all kind of the same size, and it's nice to use scale in like different ways. So I'm going to try kind of lowering the size of some of them. But what I was saying is this time we're going to move them first. So we're going to leave the background where it is, and we aren't going to use the divide tool just yet. I'm just going to move these over to the right. And if I move them over to the right exactly 10 inches, then I'll know that they line up perfectly and that they're exactly 10 inches apart. And they'll line up perfectly on this square because if we look up here with it selected, it's in exactly 10 inches. Remember, yours might look like this with no panel up at the top. You have to switch it to layout to get to the way that I'm teaching, which is literally the only way that I know how to use it. I don't understand how to use Illustrator when it looks like this. Anyway, so if we select this and then right-click, transform, move, we want to first make sure that this is all zeros, right? Vertical and horizontal should be 0. We don't want to accidentally move it down. We just want to move it to the right, so I can type in 10 inches in here. And if we check preview, it's not showing the preview right now because I'm still like in this, but if I click into the vertical, it shows the preview. And then instead of copying before, which would be fine if we did edit copy and then edit paste in place and then moved it, that would be fine. But we can actually choose copy down here. So now those are lined up at the same exact spot on these edges. And if we group them, now whenever we move one, the other one will move. We can't rotate them separately, but we can kind of adjust like this. And we'll know that since those are exactly 10 inches apart, they're like always lining up at the same place. So we can see both of them before we cut it. Because after we cut it, things get a little hard to go backwards. Okay, so same thing like for this guy, right click, transform, move, and this time we want to move it, again, make sure both of these are on 0 first. We want to move it up, but up is actually negative numbers in Illustrator, so we're going to move it -4 inches. And to make sure that I'm right about that, because I'm like, maybe negative is positive, or negative is up, or negative is down, or whatever, I'm not sure. But there it is, and it did move up into the right spot. And if we uncheck preview, we can even kind of toggle back and forth between it. And we can hit copy. So copy makes a second one. There it is. And now we could kind of fill in here, and if we grouped these, we could move them over at the same time, right? And then it's kind of simple. So right click, transform, move, and then we want to move it down 4 inches this time. So +4 inches. Oops, I forgot to hit copy. Copy. Moved it horizontally 4 inches. All right, now if we, we'll just copy and paste the backgrounds, edit, copy. Remember, choosing paste in front instead of just paste is actually important. Paste might not put it exactly on top of itself, like exactly in the right position, or paste in front is gonna leave it exactly where it is and create a duplicate. And then we can choose the background and all of these outside pieces. Oh, I missed this one. I'll just delete it and move that guy up. You can always copy and paste other motifs and like make them a different size and a different color, and then people won't notice that they're the same ones. Okay. Anyway, selecting all of them in the background and choosing divide. And now if we right click and ungroup, we can delete all of the outside edges. And that's just, it just has a little bit more flexibility than cutting it first, but you can do whatever. And then select them all. Oh, we can delete this background that got carved up. Right? I just undid it for a second before deleting it. The background gets all carved up like this. That's part of the reason why we delete it. It's not really a useful shape anymore. Okay. Object, pattern, make. And there it is. And this does, like we can see these horizontal lines in it. Those shouldn't print if all your print settings are right and everything. Sometimes if the line is thicker than that, then it maybe is real. It's hard to tell. You have to kind of analyze things. But that looks good, and we can hit done. But now the question is, how do we print this for class? We're going to use the Artboard tool, which looks a little bit like the crop tool if you are familiar with Photoshop. Doesn't matter if you're not. It's like a crosshairs with a page next to it. And this will make new artboards, right? This white part in the center of your page is your artboard, and Illustrator allows you to work on more than one page at a time. This is a little bit new information. Artboard tool. And with the Artboard tool, you can just click and drag out artboard shapes, like of any width and profile. But for our prints, we are required to print at 11 by 14. I've been told by your other class, the other class, that 11 by 14 is the same size that all of your illustration papers are in and everything. So that's all leading up towards the end of the year when you present your portfolio to the portfolio review. So we're going to make an artboard that's exactly 11 by 14. So I'm actually going to delete this artboard. You can select different artboards with the Artboard tool as well. And then you can go up to the control panel and hit delete. Now with the Artboard tool, instead of dragging one out, I'm going to choose new artboard, and it's going to make one that's exactly the size as my first artboard, which I believe was 11 by 14. Yeah. So then up here at the top, we can see that the width is 11 by 14. And there are ways of saving these as separate files that we will get to. And I actually want to make two new artboards. When we print our textile designs, we want to print two pages for each textile design that you make, okay? So we're going to draw out a rectangle that's the size of this whole artboard. So I grabbed a rectangle tool, and I'm just going to drag out this whole thing. And then I'm going to apply my pattern to it. There it is. It's beautiful. We can then, I'm actually just going to copy and paste this guy and bring it over to the second artboard as well. Now what we want to display on these is one of them should be the actual size that we're going to print it at. So if it wants to be, like if you wanted it to be an overly large print, we would print it super large, like where all of these motifs are like 5 inches across or whatever. And even though the whole repeat doesn't fit on the screen, that's okay. Or on the paper, that's okay. Because on the second one, we're going to do like a really small version of it so that we can see the structure of the repeat. Okay? So this is how you resize repeating patterns. If we go to right click, if we select it, and then right click, transform, and choose scale. We've touched on these transform tools before, right? So scale, it has scaled the whole object. It's scaled it smaller to 12%. My favorite way to adjust numbers in Photoshop and Illustrator is to click in and then use my center scroll button, and it adjusts it smoothly so you can really see what's happening as long as preview is checked. So yeah, you can make it bigger and smaller, but notice that the pattern is also changing. It's getting smaller and bigger as the rectangle gets smaller and bigger. We can adjust that, so we can tell it to not transform the patterns. If we uncheck transform patterns down here, the pattern is going to stay exactly the same size, and just the rectangle will get bigger and smaller. But what we want is actually the opposite. So I'm going to uncheck transform objects, and with just transform patterns selected, I can make this to that large scale that we were discussing. Okay, so that would be my first print. And then this one is not quite small enough. I think I would make it a little bit smaller. You want to be able to see around 3 repeats. So if we go to transform, scale, and I'm going to scale it, oops. Oh well. Scale. I was on the wrong one. I'm going to scale it smaller, so we'll start at 100% and work down. So that's probably good for something so long and wide. Like we can see these 2 columns of it, and we can see several repeats up and down, so we get an idea of the flow of the this pattern. You can hit OK. Now, saving. So we can choose File, Save, and save it as something. But this is only how you save it as an .ai file, right? So this is just for the Illustrator file, and you can save it as that in order to be able to open it up again. I don't know what to call this. So we would be able to open that file up again on another computer with Illustrator and edit these shapes again. But we want to maybe save them as JPEGs so that they're easy to open downstairs, right? Because we don't want to have to launch Illustrator downstairs in order to print something. And also, this is just good to know. So if we go to File, Export, Export As, File, Export, Export As is how you save as anything but an Illustrator file. So it's how you save as JPEGs. So we can change the format to JPEG or TIFF or PNG, whatever. All of those have various benefits that we could discuss at some other time. And if I hit export, it'll save it, but it will just save this whole artboard. So I'm going to do it to show you what happens when you don't check use artboards, okay? Export. When you export your JPEGs, you want to make sure, because we're printing them, that they are super high quality. So this should be on like 10, right? And this resolution should be at the highest resolution, 300. And then I like to use no anti-aliasing, but it shouldn't actually affect this too much either way. I prefer to use none because it can mess things up when you don't realize it. But anyway, 300 and a maximum file size. And oops. Just to show you what that did, we kind of want it to save each individual page, right? But instead it saved the whole, like everything that we were drawing on, everything that we drew. Like if we had some weird scribble out here that we had moved off of the artboard, it would save that too in your JPEG, so that's not what you want. So instead we're going to go to File, Export, Export As, and check Use Artboards. And then we can choose to just export Arrange, because I actually don't need this first artboard. I really only want to print these 2 second ones. We can choose Export. And that's on high, and that's on 300, no anti-aliasing. And then looking at those guys, so those saved here. I'll just print one just to show. And this is what these JPEGs are what would probably be easiest for you to take to the lab downstairs that we're going to go explore. Okay. I think that's it for today.